Hi,
We are
the Dyslexia Duo.
Each week, we sit down with amazing people, including top researchers and experts in dyslexia, powerful advocates, affected individuals, and more.
Together, we break down the myths, share real stories, highlight research and strategies to advise our listeners about this prevalent learning disability. Come join us.
Hey, Melissa.
Hey, Amy. Today, we are joined by Dr. Stephanie Stollar, a nationally recognized expert in reading science, assessment, and early intervention.
Dr. Stollar is the founder of the Reading Science Academy and co-creator of the Reading Science Academy Assessment Series, which has helped thousands of educators deepen their understanding of how to use data to prevent reading failure.
Her work centers on using effective screening and MTSS frameworks to ensure all students, especially those at risk for dyslexia, receive the right support at the right time.
And with years of experience as a school psychologist, university professor, and literacy consultant, Dr. Stollar brings both research knowledge and practical insight to today's conversation. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm happy to talk with you.
Thank you.
So, Stephanie, could you please share a little bit about your journey into the field of reading, science, and dyslexia? What kind of took you here? I'm thrilled to hear about what led you down this path.
Yeah, well, this was not my original intention. I wanted to work in high school with students with mental health concerns. I went to graduate school to become a school psychologist. And believe it or not, all of my graduate school training is exactly what we would now call the science of reading. So I was extremely fortunate to have been trained in these approaches and techniques from the very beginning. My first job as a school psychologist, I worked in Head Start centers and in a K-8 elementary school. And it was the contrast in those two settings that led me to reading, because in the Head Start centers, everything was about prevention and early intervention. And I saw it in front of my eyes every single day. The power of catching things early could change the course of a student's life. And in my K-8 elementary school, it was all about wait to fail. There was no prevention. There was no early intervention. You had to be behind enough. I always say your folder had to be, at least 6 to 12 inches tall before anybody would pay any attention to you. And almost every single referral that came to our team was about reading. So I started to, have the light bulbs going off, like there's got to be another way to catch these issues, even if they show up in 6th grade as a math issue or in 3rd grade as a behavioral concern. Reading is at the heart of all of this. So I started to kind of shift my learning and focus into literacy. And I actually was using what you would now know as oral reading fluency, one of the curriculum-based measures back then. But you had to wait until students were far along in 1st grade and actually reading to be able to use that to track their growth. And I was at a professional conference, and Roland Good was there talking about this new assessment he was creating that could predict oral reading fluency in 1st grade. And that was it. Ever since then, all of my work has been centered around, as early as possible, preschool, kindergarten, early in 1st grade, finding and supporting students so that they are on-track readers by the end of 1st grade. So that's the short version of how that happened.
And how long ago did that start for you?
Well, I went to graduate school in 1988, so a very, very long time ago.
Not that long
Well, I don't mean to throw you
ago.
under the bus age-wise or anything.
I own it. I own my age. I'm totally fine with it, but it was a long time ago, which I think surprises people that I learned about direct and instructionally relevant assessments. I learned about systems change. I learned about educators working with parents in teams to support students. I learned about effective research-based instruction and intervention. That was my training way back then.
Interesting.
It's just taken that long to get to this path where we're finally starting to do the effective instruction in schools.
That's right.
It's just eye-opening.
And encouraging. I'm thrilled that it's finally seeing the light of day.
Yeah, absolutely. I can remember when I first started doing education, and I was first started public ed in 91. And I can remember that because we're Texas and we're big into dyslexia identification. When I started in the dyslexia field in 92, we didn't refer a single student until third grade.
Yeah.
And because that was the thing, we're like, oh, they didn't have enough time in school yet. They didn't have enough, and it just seems so strange and so foreign to me now that that was something that I totally subscribed to. Oh, that makes sense. They hadn't been in school long enough yet. And now I was just reading some research from Nadine Gabb about the in utero that the reading brain is developing then, I mean, not that you can do MTSS then, but, still, I thought that was really interesting. So, do you have any additional experiences that helped you shape your focus on the assessment and the prevention of reading difficulties? You talk about being at high school and dealing with mental health. Is there anything beyond that that helped shape that?
Yeah, I had an opportunity to work with students with really challenging behaviors and academic needs. And I got to see how it was possible to, we would call it, do a task analysis to break down the behaviors and the skills that we wanted students to learn small enough and teach them directly enough that students could learn things, including reading, that some people had previously thought that they would never be able to learn. So I got to experience really good and powerful instruction very early on in my training and in my career. And that has, I think, shaped everything I've done since, because I just don't accept failure. I just don't accept that it's necessary to write kids off, or that we can't, that there's nothing that schools can do with certain students, or that we should just accept low performance from any student. So that was very formational for me, that it's the adult's responsibility in the school to get the conditions right for learning for every single student. So that's what's guided me ever since.
And again, back in my early days, we also wouldn't assess any older students if they were exhibiting behaviors like emotional disturbance. And now we know that sometimes the root of that emotional disturbance is that inability to read and write, which
Absolutely.
the more you know, for sure.
I was thinking too about how, thinking about the more you know, a lot of the parents now are getting these screeners done in kindergarten and first grade, the screeners for dyslexia, which I think are wonderful. But they come to me in my private practice saying, well, my child has dyslexia because they were screened and it flagged. And there's a lot of misconception around that. So I've tried to make it clear, a screener is one thing and evaluation is a completely different thing. So can you please help explain the difference with your expertise?
I will try, sure. Screening, to me, is the most important innovation in the span of my career. Universal screening, the ability to predict the future. It is literally a crystal ball, but it is not 100% accurate. All assessment has error in it, and screening is by nature brief. So what you should be doing with screeners is getting an indication of a larger skill set and a window into the future. Does the student have enough of a skill right now to be predicted to be an okay reader in the future? And the whole reason to do screening is to act on it early so that you can change the prediction. So screening is this brief set of indicators of important skills that should predict the future, but it is not extensive like a full evaluation on a student, which is very customized and individualized and driven by questions beyond what a screener can answer. So an evaluation would be a much more comprehensive experience for a student. If parents get notice from their school that their child has performed poorly on universal screening assessment, they should not necessarily be alarmed by that. They should actually be happy that the school is doing universal screening and has reached out to them, because that's the first and best opportunity for the family and the school to come together and to start communicating about that student's needs. It's very possible that students might not do well on screening, let's say the beginning of the school year or in kindergarten, and end up just fine. That's the outcome that we want. But let's say a student does have a reading disability, does have that dyslexic brain, and is going to have difficulty with learning to read. Well, even for those students, the earlier we know that and act on that information, the better the outcomes will be for that student. So I think if parents hear that from the school, it should open up a line of communication. If the parent has had concerns themselves with their child's reading behaviors or oral language, if there's a history in their family of having reading difficulties, if they themselves had difficulty in school, that should send off some additional red flags, and that's information they should share with the school right away. And then the parent should expect to get ongoing information from the school. Along with that screening, there should be some kind of a plan. What are we going to do with this information? How are we going to support the student to learn the skills that they don't currently have? How are we going to monitor their progress? When are we going to report back to you about the student's progress? So that should be the expectation when they get that kind of information from their child's school.
Do you think that if somebody had experienced like preschool education for 2 years and they are still flagging as dyslexic, do you think that that's a good indicator that they should go ahead and go forward with the evaluation? Or like, where is the line that you would say, okay, an evaluation is warranted, we should go forward here, especially knowing that crucial window of intervention being, between, according to Dr. Gabb, between 4 and 6 years old. What are your recommendations on that?
Well, I agree with that urgency about action and early intervention. I'm not sure that an evaluation is needed. I think that you can provide intensive intervention to students without a special education identification, without a label. One of the things I've learned over my career is that dyslexia identification or label or even special education status is not necessarily instructionally relevant. And we can go ahead and provide very intensive instructional support to students without any of that happening. And I think that's what we should do. We should be cautious about that. We should use data to make that decision. We shouldn't delay. So we don't necessarily have to wait until this kind of thing makes me crazy. Schools will have these policies about you have to have 6 data points collected over X period of time before X, Y, and Z can happen. You can give intensive intervention support to students from day 1 of kindergarten. They do not have to jump through a series of hoops. You don't have to wait for this kind of identification. You should provide the support that the student needs right away.
So kind of thinking about that a little bit, here in Texas, we have a kindergarten screener at the end of kindergarten and then first grade screener midway through first grade. And sometimes, teachers, whoever's administering the screeners or monitoring the screeners, usually it's on a computer, aren't sure how to monitor or even read that data sometimes. And I had often wondered, because sometimes they're not watching what the kids are doing and taking those qualitative notes as to what the kids are doing while they're doing the screener. So I've often wondered if there should be more training just in the screening process, or even more screener, like a boy, moi, oi, to kind of support some of that information. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think you should wait to the end of kindergarten to do universal screening. I don't like universal screening that's done on a computer, especially in kindergarten. Really? I think an adult should sit one-on-one. I think the screening assessment should be what I would call a production response. I think the student should have to name the letter, say the sound, read the word, segment the word, whatever the task is. An adult should hear the student doing that. Maybe when you get to 4th grade and above, maybe I could be convinced that the student sitting on a computer would be an appropriate screener. But I think the stakes are too high for that to happen at the primary grades. You can have students who don't have the fine motor skills to take that assessment.
Right.
Most of those are computer adaptive, which means you can't aggregate the scores. You can't use them to plan instruction or group students. Students can guess. And every student has their own path through the assessment. So there's no consistency for instructional planning. So those are not my preferred kinds of assessments. So I think seeing a pattern like you're suggesting over time is a really important piece of this, not just a one-time decision about risk status or about instructional need. That's one of the great things about curriculum-based measures like oral reading fluency is they're designed for decision-making over time, looking at trends in response to instruction. So that's definitely preferred.
So in your work, you emphasize, and you've talked about already quite a bit, early screening, but what, in your opinion, besides the teacher and the no device, just the teacher and the student, makes a high quality screener? And I know we've all heard early identification is critical, but I want to hear it from you. Why is early identification critical?
Yeah, so for me, a quality screener would be one that measures what the research has converged around as the essential skills: phonemic awareness, phonics, oral language and vocabulary, text reading fluency, and reading comprehension. That's where we have the most evidence that those are the essential skills. We should be screening with indicators of those skills. We don't need to screen on every grade level standard. To me, that's an achievement test. We should have screening tools that are reliable and valid and that are predictive of important outcomes in the future. That could be a group administered achievement test. It could be predicting to a state assessment in third grade and above, but it should function as that crystal ball, that early warning system, so that you know exactly what the score at the beginning of kindergarten predicts, like the end of first grade reading comprehension. You want screening tools that are brief, because you're going to have to give them to everybody, in most cases 3 times a year. You want screening assessments that will tell you which students are at risk. So doing that basic sorting function, who's on track, who might not be on track, but also screening tools that can be aggregated so that you know the magnitude of the problem in your school, where you can get a picture of the instructional context that every student is learning to read within. How many students are on track? How many students are not on track? That's the critical piece to me. Now, there was a second question you asked that I've already forgotten. So,
I have two now that you. What was our second
Why
question?
is it so? Why is it early
Why is it
intervention
so critical in your opinion? Why is early identification so critical?
early identification is critical because it's possible to prevent the vast majority of reading problems. We can actually prevent them from ever happening by the end of first grade. And even if a student is, neurologically wired differently and has dyslexia, knowing that early on changes the course of that student's life. And as you've already said, not just academically, but in terms of their behavioral and social emotional outcomes as well. So it's a responsibility I think we have as educators. This is not a compliance activity. We're not screening because, our district or the state makes us. Once you understand that reading difficulties can be prevented and early intervention changes lives, I think you have to be on board with engaging in that activity.
I think that's a critical piece of information you just said. This early identification will change the possible trajectory of their adult life too, that not
Absolutely.
just their schooling, but how they perform later as adults. My husband, who's not here, we always talked about our kids, when they were in school because they struggled. They weren't dyslexic, but they had other difficulties in school. And he'd always say, Amy, it's a marathon, not a sprint to the finish line. We need to see the whole person. And that's what I think that these screeners could possibly do, in that early identification, that early intervention could do for our student, is put them on track for that marathon instead of the sprint to the end of the school year.
Yes, absolutely.
I liked what you said about the fact that it's not just a box you check off that we did this. that the schools really need to be accountable to why we're doing it, what that data looks like, and how they can do the proper interventions or do the proper evaluations if need be going forward. So I think that's still kind of a learning process for some schools as well.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we've done a very good job of communicating to educators how powerful that information is and
Mhm.
how important the choice of a screening tool is, so that it's not treated like a compliance activity, especially the administrators who are making those selections, the state level people who are making those selections. Let's face it, educators are not always well prepared around assessment in general.
Yeah.
So the people who are making these decisions at the district or state level might be making them based on other variables like cost or the teacher's time,
Right.
not the student's time, how long it takes to give it, not necessarily what you can do with the information once you have it. So, yes, I think we still have some education to do. And this is a risk, I'm seeing around the country at the policy level, that I'm applauding the fact that states are adopting the practice of universal screening in K-3. But there's some missteps that are happening around the approval of, like I've already said, computer adaptive assessments that I don't think are the most useful in those early grades, and just not providing this kind of context and background and support for educators to use the tools to the maximum benefit once they've mandated them.
And I think you hit the nail on the head, because I've heard many an administrator when I was still in public ed saying, oh, it's faster and cheaper if we put them all in the computer lab and they're doing this screener en masse, basically. And so you have some kid melting down in the corner over here, one kid saying my headphone's not working, and then you have all this data. And I've seen it happen before where the teacher looks at the data, or they're like, oh, everything we need to see is in the green, or there's just a couple of yellow things, or maybe there's just a couple of areas where they're in the red. They don't know how to parse out all the different areas on those screeners. And I think that's a real concern, because not only there's that quantitative data we talk about, but now they also need to consider some of the family history and the qualitative data that goes along with that.
It's also possible that it wouldn't really be all that helpful to dissect those outcomes if they knew how.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my contention, is that the information on many of those tools just is not instructionally relevant. It really can't be used by teachers to help inform their instruction. And there is a much simpler, more direct way of collecting very useful information. So those are the kinds of things I would advocate for.
Good idea.
Thinking about how we would help schools interpret assessment data, how would we want them to distinguish between general reading struggles and dyslexia, for example?
Yeah. So in my experience, dyslexia is the very bottom end of a distribution of reading, spelling, decoding, mostly word level skills that impact reading comprehension and writing. It's that low end of the distribution, in spite of reasonably effective instruction. So I think both of those variables need to be part of that equation, because schools can, and many do right now, have lots and lots of students who are low performing, who are not on track on universal screening. That doesn't mean they all have dyslexia.
Right.
So for me, the dividing lines are around things like, in the context where most students become readers, this handful of students are struggling. They are not acquiring those skills, in spite of getting intervention that caused the majority of other students to catch up. This handful of students didn't. With very intensive supports, with specially designed instruction, these students are now making progress. Those are the kinds of criteria, if you will, along the way that would be how I would sort out a student who has dyslexia from one who doesn't. And I just want to add that the typical ways of assessing for dyslexia that are done in schools or in private practice, where the discrepancy between IQ and achievement or reading performance is the primary way of determining eligibility, that method has not been very useful, and it's excluded students from getting the support that they need in many cases, especially students of color, students in low income families, and so forth. So the main thing for me, I've said it a million times already, instructionally relevant.
Yeah.
I want to know exactly what the student needs for their instruction and intervention in order to make progress. And having the identification or the label of dyslexia does not necessarily tell me that. I could have two students who traditionally were evaluated in an IQ achievement discrepancy model, one determined eligible, determined to have dyslexia, the other one not, and they need exactly the same thing. So to me, that says that approach is not optimal. It's leaving out some students who actually do need some intensive support. So I wonder what your thoughts are about that, because in many places, those are controversial statements. So,
Well, and I think Melissa is the same way I am. I use not so much the screeners, but when they get to us, they've been assessed, right, already. So they've had an individual assessment. And I like to use their assessment to drive instruction. How intense, even though they may be coming to me in a group, how intense I'm going to make this certain piece be in my instructional components. With even certain kids in a group, I may go a little deeper without the other kids knowing why I'm instructing in this way to this other child, because it looks similar to the type of instruction that they're getting in this group too. So for me personally, and I'm sure Melissa's the same way, we use assessments to drive our instruction, even with our dyslexic students. Melissa, I'm sure I may be putting words in your mouth. I'm pretty sure you do the same thing.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. We do our own little baseline assessments just to kind of see where they are academically, because the school may say one thing, and then when you meet with them one-on-one, you see something a little bit different or a little bit more intense that you can remediate and help them, close some gaps that the school didn't even recognize. So those are some of the things I do.
you've had the same experience of, that identification, that label, knowing that they quote unquote have dyslexia does not necessarily tell you what to teach them next. That you have to do, in some cases, your own assessment or look at the assessment that's been done. Yeah.
Right. And every child is completely different.
That's right.
Even within, and this, Dr. Stollar, even within families, I joke around. I've had twins in my setting before, identical twins, and they both responded, and their deficits or their strengths and weaknesses were in different areas in reading and writing, and I joke around, I missed an opportunity to write a paper, but there you go. It wasn't where I was at the time. So
it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
What are some common mistakes schools make in the screening and identification process? So now that we've talked a little bit about trying to distinguish that data, like what would make somebody look dyslexic versus general reading struggles, what are some of the mistakes they make in the screening and identification process that you've witnessed?
Well, I've already mentioned one, which is choosing the wrong kind of screener. But in addition to that, their response to the screening data is not always what I would want to have happen. In many places, the response is just to focus on individual students and to find students who score low on screening and give them intervention. And in many cases, in many states, this is now becoming policy. And what's happening is going straight from screening to intervention is overwhelming the intervention system in the school and overwhelming the people in the school too. Because if you think about the national data, how many students read? 30 some percent, 40 some percent, fourth graders. Most students are struggling readers. So any individual school is going to be full of struggling and at-risk readers. So if we take the approach of going straight from screening to putting students into intervention, we will overwhelm the intervention system to the point where it can't actually work. And then what happens typically is people think, well, they must need more, so we're going to refer for a special ed evaluation. And then we overwhelm the special ed system.
Right.
And what happens, there's many negative outcomes of that, but one of the negative outcomes is that students who actually do have reading disabilities can't get the intensive support that they need and deserve because the whole system is overrun and cannot address their needs. So what I would prefer instead as the response to screening is that it gets used to evaluate the health and effectiveness of classroom reading instruction, and that the response to screening would be changes and improvements in classroom reading instruction, not as a way to delay any intervention or more intensive support, but as the first line of prevention or intervention for all students to shrink the incidence rate, to shrink the number of students who need intervention so that intervention can actually be effective. If you're trying to intervene with half the first graders in your building, you are not going to be able to pull that off. Maybe you can pull it off for 1 year, but you won't be able to sustain it over time. So I really encourage schools to look at the proportion of students who are not at expectation on screening as the very most important first piece of data after screening. Yes, you're going to eventually talk about individual students, but we won't have very many individual students we have to talk about or plan intervention for if we first approach changes in the general ed classroom.
I love that. And, I think another component to a screener, I think the screener should automatically have family history notated. If there is any family history of dyslexia or any learning difficulties, I think that should be notated because that will also help that funneling of the system. And okay, this person does have some family history. Let's watch them over here because we know a family history. I think will help eliminate some of the missing of students who do have family history and they have a red flag or not overwhelming the system like you were talking about.
Yeah.
So I think that's actually a really interesting point that you brought up because a lot of times, let's say 75% of the time, when you talk to an administrator, say, hey, there needs to be a change here, they go, money. We don't have the time. We don't have the money to retrain these teachers. We don't have the ability to do this. And you're talking about overwhelming intervention. And then, of course, because interventions overwhelm, there in turn, we overwhelm the SPED level. I know I'm again going rogue. What, in your opinion, is the route to take with admin? I mean, we can only do this for so long. I feel like we're riding a bike in mud, and getting nowhere fast. What's it going to take to convince admin and policymakers and decision makers that we need to change what's going on at tier 1 for a lot of the times?
Yeah, well, prevention isn't sexy, right? This is true.
Right.
Outside of education, outside of reading, health, people don't do the things that they need to do to prevent physical, medical issues. The same is true in reading. I've had some luck with administrators sitting down and literally calculating the money that they spend on intervention, the money they spend on special ed, the money they spend on retention.
Yeah.
And look at the trend data and project that out in 5 years. Just putting that in black and white in front of people has sometimes been powerful for getting them to change their mind into more of a preventative kind of framework. It's pay me now or pay me later. And sometimes that's all administrators are focused on is that bottom line budget. So that can be something that is an approach to try.
And I'm going to make this your new quote. Prevention isn't sexy. Write it down.
It's true.
A new
though,
t-shirt,
right?
Amy.
Right. New t-shirt.
Now a word from our newest sponsor.
Hi, This is Amy Rodenroth, and as part of the Dyslexia Duo podcast team and owner of Discovery Dyslexia Services, I want to talk to you about my business. Our COUT-trained team offers expert virtual or in-person therapy located in Prosper, Texas, using proven dyslexia curricula like Take Flight, Build, MTA, Alphabetic Phonics, and Reading by Design. We also provide crucial independent evaluations and advocacy services. Don't wait. Empower your child today. Visit www.discovereed.com to learn more. That again is www.discoveread.com. Discovereed, covering all your dyslexia needs.
Hi, this is Melissa with Kids First Dyslexia Services. I am excited to share with you my private practice. Kids First Dyslexia Services is a private practice that specializes in dyslexia therapy. Each one-on-one session focuses on instruction specific to your child's needs in a nurturing environment that develops self-esteem, builds confidence, and fosters a sense of accomplishment, resulting in happier kids with higher levels of achievement. We provide a professional, personalized experience, always putting the child first. We value the relationships with both our students and parents because strengthening skills and overcoming hurdles to achieve desired goals and success is a team effort. For more information, please visit www.kidsfirstdyslexia.com. That is www.kidsfirstdyslexia.com.
Let's return to the show. Interesting. Well, one thing that's happening in Texas now is that parents are getting vouchers from the state, not this school year, but I think next school year, where they can, pay to go to private school or pay to go to school that, might support their child's needs a little better. And in some cases, some of these parents are doing homeschooling and they're sending them to people like Melissa and myself or to a micro school to get the support that they need. So thinking along those lines, what can parents of homeschool or private school students do to ensure that their child is being evaluated for dyslexia if they decide to go to a micro school or a private school or like a parochial school or something like that?
Yeah, well, I'm always surprised that many parents don't know that it is the legal and financial responsibility of the school district that they live in to do the evaluation for special education. I'll back up a step and say many parents, many educators don't know that dyslexia is one of the specific learning disabilities, which is one of the federal special ed categories. So this sits within all of the special education laws that we've had since the mid-70s. So parents should know that they can request from the district that they live in an evaluation of their student at no cost to them. And the school district, parents should know that the school district can say no. And then that there is a due process set of actions that would kick in that circumstance if the parent wants to pursue it. They should also know that if they get an outside evaluation, the school district does not have to accept it. I've worked with too many parents who did not know that ahead of time, sacrificed and spent their own money to get an evaluation, only to take it to the school district expecting services and find out that that's not the way the law works. So I think we have to all really do a better job educating family members that yes, they can request an evaluation. In most states, there's like a 60-day window. I don't know what it is in Texas, but a window in which the district has to respond. And the response can be, no, we don't agree that we suspect a disability. Or it can be, yes, we agree, and we're going to conduct a multi-factored evaluation. And then the parent is part of the team that makes the decision. It's not the decision of an educational evaluator or school psychologist or any one individual. It's a team decision whether or not the student is a student with a disability and has dyslexia, and the parent is part of that team. And at the decision point, the district can say, well, we've done our evaluation and we don't think the student has a disability. The parent can disagree with that. And again, that's an opportunity to go into due process. So there's legislation that protects parents and families, that provides services. If the student is identified as having a disability, then it is the district that they live in's responsibility to provide the specially designed instruction, the special education services, regardless of where the student attends school. If they are homeschooled, if they go to a private, parochial, charter, no matter what school they attend, if they have an IEP, it is the district of residence that's legally responsible for providing that specially designed instruction. Now, what is the specially designed instruction? That's driven by the IEP. And again, the IEP team has members from the school district and the family. So all of these things need to get negotiated. And I think parents need to know that if you're in that marathon, that long game that you mentioned, Amy, you have to sometimes put your emotions aside and understand that you have to have a relationship with these people
Right.
in the school. And I would say that to the school people. You have to put your emotions aside and establish a relationship with the family members, because you both have a shared responsibility. And the primary focus is that child, not you yourself, not the adults on the other side of the table. It's about serving that child.
I didn't know that second part at all. I didn't know that they were legally responsible for providing the services to the child
Yes.
when there's an IEP. That's new learning to me.
Now, Texas could have something
I was
different,
going to
as
say,
they
I think
often do.
Texas is different. Yeah,
But
I
I
think
doubt
Texas
it.
is different.
I really doubt it.
It used to be when I was in public ed, and we would identify, right? We would do the child find, we do the assessment, we do the identification, but they couldn't receive services with me.
Mm.
That was,
Yeah, I look into that, because
it may have
I'm
changed.
sure.
I've been retired for almost 5 years. Maybe it's changed.
Well, that and now because it's all under special education, I think that may be a different, maybe because it
Maybe.
was under 504 for quite a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we had a little bit of different.
And I know that when I'd have parents, I have quite a few parents who call me for an assessment. And one of my first questions is your child in a school district? And they'll say, yes. And if they say yes, I'll go, you can request an evaluation, because I want to be upfront with them. And then even if they say yes, but I still want to do an outside evaluation, I tell them up front, I can do this evaluation, but they still have the right to say, yes, we accept this evaluation, or no.
Right.
This is not how we interpret this data.
Yeah, that's good to make sure they understand that at the beginning.
Yeah.
So, switching gears from assessments, which I feel like I learned a lot from you. So thank you for that. Switching gears from assessments to thinking about the instructional practice that we kind of touched on a little bit. I stopped working in public schools back in 2021, and MTSS was kind of a new term for me right as I was getting close to leaving. So could you explain MTSS to me and to other of those who aren't in the education world who might not know?
Sure. So MTSS stands for Multi-Tiered System of Supports. It is a school improvement framework in which prevention and early intervention are prioritized. And it involves teams of educators, family members, community members, using data to engineer a seamless system of support that gets all students to grade level expectations.
So you said community members. How does that work?
So in MTSS, there are teams at all levels of the system, and parent representatives and community representatives serve on those teams, except for the teams that form about an individual student. That would be just that student's family members, not others. But building leadership teams, district leadership teams who are planning for this system of supports, they would have community members, parents who are not representing their own child, but representing parents as a constituency, if you will, or a stakeholder group. So you might have members of the business community, you might have members of educational advocacy groups, you might have other community groups who have a seat at the table during that district leadership team meeting, so that the needs of the community are represented in the plans that are made to improve reading outcomes, and so that the plans are not running contrary to what families and community members might accept or want to have happen. So having them as representatives and members of the team allows that two-way communication to happen from the start.
That's interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. I'd like to get you ladies on some of those teams in your local communities.
I know. I was thinking maybe I should find out how to do that at my school district. I was involved in the local school district for so many years, and I worked in another neighboring school district as well. So I would love to be a part if they would have me. I would love to be a part of that.
Well, you'd be a wealth of information, that's for sure.
Awesome.
Well, thank you.
So you've been a strong voice for using MTSS effectively, and I see your book on the shelf back there. I'm so excited about that. How do you see MTSS being used to serve our students with dyslexia effectively?
Yeah, I said earlier what I think is the key point about this. If the school is overwhelmed trying to meet the needs of so many students with dyslexia can't get the intensive support that they need and that they're legally required to receive. And so the laws that we have now around the country focused on serving students with dyslexia, I think have to start with that system of classroom instruction, what we call tier 1, and that's the best way to make it possible to meet the needs, so that resources are freed up in the intervention system, in the special education system, to be able to give truly intensive support to students who need it. You know, you might hear the kinds of things that I do, like, well, the spots are all full in intervention, or we don't have any more interventionists, or the caseload for the special educator is already full. And those kinds of circumstances cause pressures, sometimes, inadvertently, but pressures on educators to not recognize, not see the signs, not take action when students are struggling. So I think we have to shift to a systemic view. We have to think about the service delivery systems in schools. Yeah. And it all starts with getting the first way we teach reading lined up to what students need. We can't solve the problem just through intervention. So if you think about that triangle that represents the tiered model, we have to think about working it, in both directions, top down and bottom up.
Interesting, because we've talked about this just now about how not all admin and here we are in Texas, and we're supposed to be, really big. Well, we are very big into dyslexia law and everything that goes along with it. But I still see guided reading being offered. I still see reading recovery being offered. I still see Fontes and Pinnell being offered. And Fontes and Pinnell is at a tier 2. I still see it being offered. And I don't understand, other than, well, it's sexy. It's a sexy curriculum. It comes all boxed and pretty and in cellophane. And it's more times I've ever said sexy in my life, I think. But I mean, and it's eye-catching. It's magpie syndrome. You see it and you're like, wow, that's got to be good. It looks so good, And we have to change people's minds about some of this. You have to walk through the weeds to get what the kids need to get to that comprehension, and sitting in the overstuffed chairs with the fairy lights in the corner of the book room,
Yes.
Those types of things.
I wish the policies and laws were shifted so that the response to screening was, if more than 20% score low on screening, you have to sit down as a grade level team and analyze the instruction that you're providing to all students, the classroom reading instruction. So what are you teaching? Is it matched to what the students in front of you need? How are you teaching it? So getting at the instructional materials that you're using. What's the level of knowledge of the teachers to deliver that instruction? How are the other adults in the school going to support the teacher to be effective in giving that tier 1 reading instruction? What's going to be the system of supports around that classroom? Those should be the considerations and the conversations that are happening, not here's an individual who scored low on screening. Which tier 2 intervention are they going to get? That's the shift.
You're right. I mean, and I think as teachers, and I'm not just saying as Texas teachers, I think all teachers, we're given so much leeway as to what not only we teach, but how we teach it. And I think there needs to be some unification, like looking at the data and then coming together and say, this is what is most important and most effective, because we see these dyslexia situations come up in our tier 1 instruction. No, I think that's important.
We haven't done a very good job preparing teachers to make those choices.
Right.
And, you mentioned that you have legislation now that gives parents the dollars that are portable to other settings. So, this is in my 30 plus year career, this is what I've seen over time, that there have been a couple of rounds of national movements around improving reading outcomes, around increasing accountability on schools. And the educators have not stepped up to the plate. The educators have resisted those efforts. And now we have a situation where people have other options. And COVID really accelerated this because people experienced those other options. And so now it's a marketplace issue, right? So I think educators have to pay attention to this because many public schools have declining enrollment. There are other choices that parents can make, and they are voting with their feet to go to other, take their children to other places. Right. So I think we have to really wake up and pay attention to this. Most educators go into public school because they understand that education is the great equalizer. It's the way to lift everybody out of the circumstances of their birth. It's the opportunity to change lives. And if we are not actualizing that, we have to hold up the mirror to ourselves and we have to take responsibility for that. I know these are big, big statements I'm making, but I really do feel strongly. And it's possible. I want to go back to the, beginning comments about this is not expecting people to create something out of thin air. This is possible. We've known for a long time that it's possible to get just about every student reading by the end of first grade. We have to act on that research. We have to act on that information. And we have to get those systems in place that allow teachers to do it without being overwhelmed.
I had somebody I knew who was a teacher and worked with me, and she said that she didn't really know how to teach people how to read as a first grade teacher, and that some other first grade teacher told her, well, you just teach them the phonics lesson and then have them practice a whole lot. They'll pick it up. And I was thinking,
only. If only that was true.
I was thinking, well, that's very interesting that this is this was not that long ago. This was probably 6-7 years ago, that this is the way that some things are happening in districts that are in affluent areas. I mean, it's not like it's a low income Title I area either. So it's very interesting to me.
It's happening still today. I've worked for several years in a graduate program, and I wish I had $1 for every teacher who said exactly what your colleague said. I was never taught how to teach reading, or I didn't know what to do if the way my district told me to teach reading wasn't working for a student. So one of the things that has me really hopeful right now is some work I'm doing with teacher educators. There is a whole contingent of university faculty who understand that they were not prepared well to teach reading, but now they're university professors, right? And the methods they've been training their teacher candidates in, they now understand are not effective, and they want to learn. They want to change. They want to do something different. So that really has me feeling optimistic and hopeful for the future. It can't come soon enough.
I know, right? And I think that I would like to know from you, what do you think are some effective tier 1 instruction models that should be put in place for these teachers?
Yeah, so taking advantage of what we know in the research about what to teach, that sequence of skills that Amy mentioned that are required to get students to reading comprehension, what we know in the research about how to teach, direct, systematic instruction, with lots of cumulative review and practice, good assessments that allow us to look at student outcomes over time, make decisions with trend data, professional development that supports teachers with coaching so that they can really optimize what they've learned, and a system of supports around them so that we move away from tier one instruction being teachers putting their heads down, closing their door, and doing the best they can, and having intervention or support systems being outside of the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons MTSS was first conceptualized way back in the 80s was to blend the gen ed and special ed service delivery systems to make that a seamless system of support so that we remove the barriers to access, and we make the special education system supportive of the gen ed classroom teacher. So those would be some things, high level things that I would say are part of a good, effective tier one system. And if you have good universal screening, you'll know if your tier one system is effective. So I gave some high level things to consider, but the devil's always in the details, and every school has different needs and resources. So you should be measuring how effective is your current service delivery. If you start the year with 45% of students on track and you end the year with 60% on track, you can do better. That's not good enough. There's something different that you could do to meet the needs of your students, and you should be talking as a grade level team about what those things are.
I agree. I think some schools are really good at doing this, where they have their, I don't want to say care meetings, but just their team meetings where they meet with the principal or the assistant principal, and they talk about data, and then they decide what they're going to do going forward. And they might notate who's low on the screener or who's low on the data at that point. And then they go forward with the appropriate instruction, or at least what they deem appropriate instruction going forward. But I've noticed that a lot of times they're the same frequent flyers on the list, those kids that are continuously on the list, that nothing gets really done with them. They don't get referred as quickly as they should be referred for an evaluation. And I think that that's kind of another thing I would like to say, is that I think that not only that should be dealt with in the classroom, like we talked about earlier with the tier 2 intervention, but I think it also should be dealt with as a school. Like, what are the plans going forward to help this child who is continuously on our list?
Yes.
Yeah.
And do you have any kind of insight for that?
Well, it's hard to help those high flyers when half of your class is scoring just as low.
Right.
So that's the perspective shift that I'm trying to encourage, that Sarah Brown and I are trying to encourage in our book, MTSS for Reading Improvement, to take a systems view. And in those conversations, those grade level team meetings, rather than talking about individual students, to talk about customizing the tier 1 instruction to the students who are in front of us. That's a process that needs to happen every year. It needs to happen across the school year. I see way too much whole group, out of the box, published program, classroom reading instruction that is flying over the heads of half of the students in that classroom. And every year they fall farther and farther behind. That is not MTSS. That is not helpful. And it's really an important shift that we need to try to encourage, away from only having a solution that's one student at a time, to seeing the solution resting first and foremost in the first way we teach reading in the gen ed classroom in tier 1. That's going to free up the headspace and the resources to accelerate the more intensive support that you're saying is needed for students who need it. It's going to allow you to sift out which ones really do need intensive support. If everybody looks like they're at risk, which one has dyslexia?
Right.
It's like impossible to tell.
That's a really good point.
It's impossible to tell. I don't know how you could defend a decision in that context.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a completely different way of thinking about assessment and instruction and a tiered model It's different from the way it's being implemented in many places.
Mm-hmm. So, and I've been looking at the Texas law, and it does say, you can be evaluated, you can receive services, but when I go deeper into dyslexia, since dyslexia has been recently moved under special education, there's a lot of gray area. Which is probably now I want to ask all my friends that have dyslexia services or have dyslexia classes if they have any homeschool kids that attend their sessions, because that I wonder how many parents are aware that they could attend if
I
they need.
wonder how many districts are aware.
Right, right, because it didn't occur to me until Melissa goes, well, we just made that switch. I'm like, that's right. We did just make that switch from 504 to special education. That's why I would never have seen that. So interesting. What advice would you give to parents when their child has been flagged by a screener? What would be some good things to sometimes, the way I see parents react, they're surprised or they're not surprised or they get teary and, they just think everything's over or they want everything right this second. Let's get it all assessed and get it all taken care of, which I appreciate that little push right myself, honestly. But what's your advice for parents?
Yeah, I understand the concern, and I think it's fine to take action, but not to be alarmed, right? Like to understand that the actions that they take, the actions that the school take can change the course of the student's reading development, and that they can play a role in that. So opening up the communication with the school, making sure that you get information about how the school's going to be supporting their child and what can they do at home. What should they be watching for? How often is the school going to be sharing their child's progress with them? And are there things that they can do to support their student to grow in the way that they need to? Those would be things to pay attention to. I would caution parents, this is like Dr. Google, if you have some weird rash on your arm, you go online, like caution parents about
MD, yeah.
Yeah, about that approach, because there's a lot of unscrupulous information online. There's a lot of misinformation online. So find an advocate, find an expert, find an ally who you can get good, solid information from, because you can, as a parent in a lot of areas, you can waste a lot of time, money, and get distracted down a rabbit hole that's not actually going to be productive. Right. So get a credible source of information who you can go to help you on that journey. And it's not necessarily going to be something that is a lifelong issue. It's something that could possibly, with some early intervention, be corrected and be in the rear view mirror for that family going forward.
That's one of the reasons we created this podcast was, last season we said, we're not going to give snake oil. We're not going to support things that, don't align with good intentions and integrity. Yeah. We're going to give you all the researchers. We're going to give you all the research behind it, and we're going to give you the information. So that's why you're here.
It's such a valuable resource because parents don't have time to sort through that, and they're not educators.
Right.
So they need people like yourselves who can help them cut through all the noise and focus on what is research informed and what's going to be most beneficial.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And we're grateful to people like you who come in here and share your expertise, because you've done years and decades of research that really help guide all of us to kind of know which direction we're supposed to be following and do the best for kids. Because that's what we're all here for, is to help children and adolescents and even adults improve their reading skills.
I'm sure you're finding there are many educators, researchers who are very willing and eager to have opportunities like your podcast to share accurate information, especially with families.
And we do get some snake oil that reaches out every once in a while.
So looking forward, Stephanie, if you could think about every school in the country or even in the world, if they adopted one practice tomorrow to reduce reading failure, what would you recommend?
This is tough.
Well, your book, The
Yes. Well,
MTSS.
that's where I was going to go is the one practice that I think could have the biggest impact on reading outcomes is to sit down after the screening as a team and look at the proportion of students who are on track and not on
Yeah.
track and have that prompt the conversation, inform the conversation about what tier one should look like in that school and customize the tier one instruction to the needs of those students. That's the soapbox I've been on for decades. I've seen it work. I've seen it turn around outcomes in some very challenged schools. And so I think that's what I would advocate for. If I had a magic wand and could make one practical change, that would be it.
So you definitely recommend screeners.
Yes, I
Screeners
do.
first. Mhm.
Absolutely. It is a game changer. Yes.
Awesome. So, what gives you the most optimism about the future of dyslexia awareness and instruction?
Two things. One, I already mentioned. I feel optimistic because of the change in higher ed.
Right.
I'm not naive. I know how hard that change is. I know how slow those systems are to change. But I'm optimistic by the number of people who want that change to happen and who are making it happen right now. Also, just the grassroots effort that's happening around the country. The teachers, the individual teachers who are spending their own time and money to retrain themselves about reading and literacy. They're spending their own time and money learning and buying materials that are research aligned. That has me very, very optimistic because we need the support from the top, so to speak, but it can't only come from the top. Teachers have to be on board too. And I see that grassroots effort happening right now, and I'm very excited about it.
So it's interesting that you said that because I'm a QI and I train teachers in a dyslexia therapy, right? And it's a 2-year process for them to become dyslexia therapists. And I have 5 concurrent cohorts going right now, but 4 of my cohorts are people that are in districts, so the district is paying for it, which is great. That's wonderful. But I have one cohort, and it's my biggest cohort of 18, where they're all paying out of pocket. They're paying out of pocket and they're paying for these materials to get this training. And it's not, the materials isn't cheap. I like to think my training is inexpensive, but I know on a teacher's budget, it's not always a feasible thing to do. So I agree with you completely. I'm seeing a shift within the school system. These teachers are seeing things, it's not working. Maybe I need to go and research and do something a little differently. So I totally agree with that.
It's exciting.
Yeah, hats off to those teachers. Those teachers are doing a great thing.
I agree.
Absolutely. All right, you ready for our rapid fire questions?
Yes,
so.
let's go.
Okay.
All right. So, what is your favorite book that you recommend to teachers?
Oh gosh, my favorite book that I recommend to teachers, A Speech to Print, Louisa Moat's Speech to Print. Every teacher should read that book.
Every teacher should absolutely read that book. Okay, one word you use to describe dyslexia.
Oh my gosh, I can't think. One word. I can't think of one
Or
single word.
So you can do 2 or 3 words. You can use a phrase.
We're not that picky.
Okay, I'm going to give you a phrase. A difference that doesn't have to define you.
Oh, good. I like it.
Nice. I like
I couldn't come up with a single word.
I love it. Okay, a myth about reading you'd love to stop once and for all.
That reading is natural, that when the child is ready or they've matured in some certain way, it will emerge from them. We just have to wait until they're ready.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Talking
I wish
to
that would go
you,
away.
reading recovery. Just saying. Your go-to productivity hack or routine.
Oh, that's easy. My productivity hack is the full focus planner.
Oh,
This was a game changer for me, life altering process of doing away with that never ending to-do list and getting focused and not going to bed at night and having my mind racing with, a million things that I need to do the next day. Full focus planner.
awesome.
Okay, I'm going to write that down.
Check it out. Yep.
Okay. Who inspires you most in the field of literacy?
Probably Louisa Moats. She's, for a very long time, been inspirational to me because of her use of research as her guiding light because of her ability to kindly but firmly correct people when they are on the wrong track and bring them back to the research. And because she's tenacious, she's been at this for a very long time and she's not giving up. So she's definitely an inspiration to me.
That makes sense. She is a wonderful, wonderful person that has done wonderful work for us.
Absolutely.
It's amazing. And something you enjoyed outside of your professional work?
Well, of course, reading. You would not be surprised for me to say that's my number one hobby, but also tennis. I play tennis 4 or 5 days a week, and I love playing tennis.
That's amazing.
You know,
That's
I've
awesome.
heard very good things about tennis. I actually just heard a report that they think that sports like that, where you have to hit a ball back and forth, is actually a very good deterrent for Alzheimer's disease progressing.
I've
Where
heard
did you
that
find
too.
that? I have never heard of that before.
Yeah.
Really? Why?
I just heard about it on
Is it the visual
It's using both sides of your
follow-through
brain.
and both?
And the social aspect of it, it's not like cycling where you're by yourself. Yeah, the cardio and the social and that eye hand. Yep, keeping track of the score. Like, yeah, there's several aspects that they've theorized, I guess, about
Oh, wow.
it
And trying
sort
to
of
like,
putting it off.
yeah.
I
It's
may
just
just be
fascinating.
succumbing to Alzheimer's. Let me just.
Me too.
I'm not very good at sports and eye-hand coordination, and like the best I can do is brush my teeth with my other hand. That's as good as it gets.
Yeah, a lot of
I can
people are
write in
getting into-
cursive with my left hand.
Oh, that's good.
Oh, that's good.
That is
Yeah,
good.
I can't do anything like that.
Well, awesome. Well,
What were you saying, Stephanie? What are
Oh,
a lot of
pickleball.
people
A lot of
doing?
people are getting into pickleball.
Now-
If tennis is just too much for you,
Yeah,
pickleball seems a little bit more accessible for people.
I've wanted to do pickleball, though I know it's kind of tennis light. I've wanted to do that, but I can't find anybody around me who would be willing to take on a really bad player. So I
You
may
need
just
some
have
other
to,
beginners.
Yeah, I may just have to play with my dog, hit the ball and go get it, bring it back to me. I may have to do that.
That could work.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much for doing our podcast with us. We really appreciate. Are you going to IDA?
I am. Yeah.
Yeah,
you
that's
guys
what I
gonna be
thought I
there?
saw.
Oh.
Yeah, we're going to be there. We're going to be there as the duo.
Oh, awesome. That's
Mhm.
great.
Yes, you'll
yeah.
have to stop by our booth and you can do a live podcast with us.
Oh,
just
I
for a
would
few
love
minutes.
that. I will definitely come and
Yeah.
find you in the exhibit hall. That's great. Yes. I will
So
be
did I
there.
see you work with Joan Sedita?
Well, not formally, but yes.
Okay,
We're-
because you were on her Keys to Literacy page. Yeah.
Oh, she posted one of my blogs. She reposted
Okay.
it once. We've partnered on some projects together. Yeah, she's great.
Yeah.
We
she
showed
was-
up at a reading league conference with the same outfit on once, so that was fun.
awesome.
Great
favorite thing
minds.
ever.
Great minds.
Yeah, I'll
my
take
favorite
it.
thing.
Yeah, I'll be in that club with her.
Well, yeah, we'll definitely see you. IDA. We're on the whatever the exhibitors fitter is where we'll be. So
Yeah, cool. Good for
Yeah.
you.
I know what's
I think
going.
our booth is 801. I
Is
think.
it? Okay.
I will come and find you.
Okay.
We'll
For
be
sure.
there.
It'll be great to meet you in person.
So this is Amy,
And Melissa. And
And
we
we're gonna-
are
the Dyslexia.
Dyslexia Duo.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.
The Dyslexia Duo hosts are Melissa Dean.
And Amy Rodenroth. The producer is Greg Rodenroth.
Dyslexia awareness is so important. Please share with your friends, family, and anyone who needs to know more about dyslexia.
Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and X at the Dyslexia Duo.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.